Play is defined in different ways by many different scientists, child development experts, and organizations. All definitions have this in common. Play is a way children learn how objects work in the world, how people think, feel, and act, and how to problem solve. Play also creates natural opportunities to practice and build important skills such as communication, advanced planning, managing emotions, and building relationships, develop logical and critical thinking, and build creativity and imagination. Pretty much everything a child needs to be successful socially and academically. Play is not just fun, it is a critical aspect of a child's overall learning and development. What about the effect of play on the brain? Since it's unethical to do brain research on human beings, that could be harmful. Much of what we know about the brain comes from animal studies, especially on rats. There are some genetic, biological, and behavioral characteristics of rats that resemble those of humans. Many symptoms of human conditions can be replicated in mice and in rats. Early research showed that rats who were provided an environment with lots of objects to explore had thicker cerebral cortices than did the impoverished rats, those raised without this kind of stimulation. Rats raised in stimulating environments had bigger brains and were smarter. They were able to find their way through mazes more quickly than rats who were raised in environments without stimulation. More recent research with rats revealed that rough and tumble free play leads to increased levels of a chemical needed for growth and maintenance of brain cells. Levels of this chemical also increased after rats were allowed to explore. So how is learning through free play different from learning through direct or didactic instruction? The main difference is that free play is directed by the child and is done for fun. It is driven by the internal need and interest of the child. Play is about the journey, not the destination. Direct instruction involves the teacher serving as the expert whose job is to impart specific knowledge to the student. This is a critical point because it is the open-ended nature of play that encourages children to make their own discoveries about how the world works, engages them in creative problem solving, and helps them self-regulate instead of being regulated by an adult's guidance or limits. Because play is self-directed, it automatically meets the individual needs of the child and fits her unique learning style and developmental stage. When adults do the teaching, or even when children learn through observation of adults, they're learning a specific pre-existing concept or fact. Play, on the other hand, allows children to use their own innovation and creativity. However, guided play is very important for children's learning. It involves adults following the lead of the child, but also participating by providing materials, scaffolding, and prompts to assist children's learning. The adult follows the child's lead, but also provides scaffolding to extend and expand the child's play with a learning goal in mind. Let's go through the stages of play that naturally correspond to children's developmental capacities: sensory play, functional play, early symbolic play, and then dramatic play. Each stage is driven by and at the same time builds a child's growing brain. Between birth and 12 months old, babies play using their senses, touch, taste, and smell, to understand how objects and people work. Play at this stage involves mouthing, banging, shaking, batting, and gazing at objects. Babies are learning about the outcomes of their actions. What does the ball do when I roll it? What happens if I throw it? Every baby is different. Each experiences and processes information from her senses differently. Babies all have preferences for different textures, sounds, smells, tastes, and movements. It is important for adult caregivers to provide a range of objects and experiences and watch to see how each baby responds. Your observations provide very important information about a child's preferences and learning style. So what's going on in the brain at this time? Babies are born with a brain full of neurons. Learning about the world through the 5 senses develops pathways between these neurons. The more babies explore through their senses, the stronger the pathways become, helping them understand the properties of objects and what they can do. Information from all the senses generally passes through the thalamus to get to the cerebral cortex, where these sensations are processed. Information from the senses may connect to wide and diverse areas of the brain. For example, via the limbic system, a smell can trigger intense emotions, such as babies calming when they smell the breast milk on mom's t-shirt. The circuits that store memories give meaning to what babies and adults see and hear. Functional play involves a child using one or more objects in the way they are intended to be used, such as talking on a toy phone or sweeping with a child-sized broom. This stage typically starts around 15 months old and lasts up until about 24 months old. This is a good example of how children use the existing knowledge they have about the world as a basis for their play, and how they know that a broom is for sweeping, and perhaps decide to sweep up all the balls that have fallen out of the ball pit, a sign of emerging creative thinking. The part of the brain that toddlers are using during this time is the cerebral cortex, which processes the information that children take in through their senses to form ideas about the properties and functions of objects. The limbic system, especially the hippocampus, is also involved. It is responsible for forming memories about how these objects work. The cerebral cortex continues to develop throughout childhood. Seeing examples of functional play during this time period is one sign that the cerebral cortex is actively developing. It will continue to develop throughout childhood. In children as young as 15 months old, you will see the beginnings of symbolic thinking, which means that children understand that an object can be a symbol for something else. For example, children at this age understand that a baby doll represents a real baby. You might see a toddler hold a bottle up to a doll's mouth, cover a stuffed bear with a blanket, or make a sound as she moves a car back and forth across the floor. As children make the link between an object and what it represents, they're using areas of the cerebral cortex, especially those involved in thinking, language, and problem solving. From about 24 to 30 months old, children enter a more complex stage of symbolic thinking. They can now imagine that an object can be a stand-in for something it has little or no resemblance to. For example, a block becomes a phone, or Play-Doh balls serve as cookies. Between 30 and 36 months old, dramatic pretend play begins to emerge as children string together several sequences of play to tell simple stories. They might now feed their bear, brush his teeth, read him a story, and put him to bed. Or they might use a wooden spoon from the kitchen to be a fishing pole and sit at the edge of the couch, waiting for a fish to bite. Children build on their ability to use objects as props during play, so they may take a cardboard box and pretend it's the bath for their baby doll, or use a pillow as a pretend birthday cake. From about 36 to 42 months old, children's pretend play becomes even more complex. They start to take on different roles. A child may pick up a purse from the dramatic play area and pretend she is going to work like mommy. Developing stories together, with each taking on different roles. This involves a range of social skills such as cooperation, compromise, and negotiation, and empathy. Between approximately 42 and 48 months old, children develop simple stories using inanimate objects such as action figures and plastic animals that are assigned personalities and tasks. The child has the characters talk to each other now. Children may make up a whole story about their trains finding a place to eat and sleep, and they may use blocks to build a station for them. From 49 to 60 months old, children's imaginations have developed to the point where they don't even need props. Children will develop more elaborate stories in which each child takes on specific roles. For example, one child is the mama bear and the other is the baby. The play sequence becomes longer, and they are more integrated and have a beginning, middle, and end. Also at this age, thanks to the growth in the limbic system, children will add details from their memories to include in their pretend play. For example, children who are pretending to visit the doctor may talk about getting a shot with a sticker for being brave. Children will also correct the behavior of other children if they act inappropriately, and will monitor their play acting according to a plan or script they have agreed upon. It is not surprising that imaginative play flourishes during the period when connections are building in the prefrontal cortex and children's executive functioning skills are developing rapidly. Each of these developmental achievements involves common characteristics: the ability to make and carry out a plan, to engage in problem solving and correcting errors, such as when one child steps out of their role, to inhibit impulses to act outside of the script, to remember what each child's role is and the direction of their script, and to have the cognitive flexibility to adapt the storyline in interesting new directions. The stages of play describe the developmental sequence of play skills. However, there is another important component to play, the social aspect of play. There are 4 main strategies to describe the ways in which social skills appear in children's play. From birth to about 15 months old, babies engage in solitary play, which means they play independently and are not yet able to play with other children. Of course, babies do play with adults, who provide babies with a range of objects to explore and follow babies' cues to keep them engaged. Beginning at about 15 months old, children start to engage in parallel play. At this age, children play next to one another while engaged in their own separate activities. They play side by side and notice each other. They may carefully observe each other, listen to each other, and even imitate each other, but they are not playing interactively. Around 18 to 24 months old, children move into associative play, which means that while children are mostly still playing independently, they often do the same thing as the other children. For example, if one child puts on a fireman's hat, another child will put one on too. Children will often talk to each other with words, sounds, and/or gestures at this stage. They will start to take turns with objects they both desire, with guidance from adults. Finally, children begin to engage in cooperative or collaborative play starting at about 30 to 36 months old, up to 60 months old and beyond. As described earlier, collaborative play means children are engaged in interactive play in which they are co-creators of the experience. Whether it is developing a story they are acting out together or constructing and building out of blocks. Collaborative play involves a range of social skills such as cooperation, compromise, and negotiation, and empathy. As discussed earlier, this type of cooperative play is critical for healthy brain development. Research shows that it causes changes in the prefrontal cortex that build the brain's executive control center, which has a critical role in regulating emotions, making plans, and solving problems. Being part of these complex social interactions requires heavy use of the prefrontal cortex to negotiate who will do what and how the story will unfold. This helps prepare children to be successful socially, academically, and later on in work.